Hey, you guys, this is Josh
And Carolyn.
with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat. Food for thoughts. As you can see, Carolyn and I are in different locations, and so our rhythm's going to be a little off today, but we are excited to be joining you live today.
Yeah, we are going to be answering your gardening questions that you've been leaving for us over the last several weeks. But right off the top, I'm going to apologize. We are obviously in two very different places and live streaming from two places. And that kind of means that it's coming through the internet here at Riverbend. And I know it's a little grabby. I think the sound is working really well, but I keep seeing Josh freezing and Josh keeps saying I'm freezing. So we're just going to kind of roll with it and see what we get. And you guys are great at just like hanging with us and getting through the bumps of rural internet. I really thought that when we got Starlink, that it was going to really even all of these things completely out. And it has definitely improved our internet significantly, but we still have these moments where this is what happens. So.
Yep, and we'll take it for living in the country. It's good.
It is.
Yeah.
Good trade-off. So where are you?
I am in the city.
You are not in the country right now.
Minneapolis, in a very different environment. And I guess we're diving right into the chit chat here, but let's back up just so that everybody knows. We're going to be talking about your garden questions today. And just covering some of the questions as we've been talking about gardens for the last few weeks. But before we do that, we're going to get into some chit chat.
Chit chat time. All right. So you're in Minneapolis.
So I am in Minneapolis. I am working with one of our partners on a new project that we're going to be bringing to the homestead community in the next year. And so there's a lot of groundwork to do. Very excited about that, but also keeping it under our hat for the details. But some exciting stuff coming. So I'm gone for the week. It's actually warmer in Minneapolis than it is in North Idaho. That's a little surprising to me today.
It is. We woke up to -5 degrees this morning on the homestead. And let me just say, -5 is cold. That's a chilly morning around here.
Yeah, it is. Hey, I just want to give a shout out. I'm seeing people from all over the world, from Croatia, from Canada. It's pretty normal to have a lot of our friends from Canada here, all over the United States, and
Denmark.
There we go. Denmark a bit earlier. So welcome, you guys. This is just so cool to be able to hang out with you guys. And part of the pantry chat is just kind of bringing you onto our front porch. Is the goal, and be able to just sit and visit. So we love this and love seeing you guys. There's Mississippi, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, New Scotland. Okay, very cool. Southern California, right on.
That's really neat. I know we're still doing chit chat, but this kind of jumps right into chit chat. So I just saw this one. Since we're talking about Starlink and rural internet, how does she get Starlink, honey?
You know what? Just go to starlink.com, I think, and you should have a place to sign up. It is in beta, so you can't just purchase it right now. They put you on a wait list, and depending on your area, I think they're kind of just moving around, and they have some pattern of moving around and adding people to the system as they're building it up. So if that's something that is useful to you, go get on the list for sure. You probably won't get it right away. But they are going kind of by geographic regions, and then your timing of signing up. And for us, and if you've lived in rural, about the only option has been HughesNet or Viasat, I think it is. And both have just not been very good over the years. And while Starlink still has a few challenges in beta, it is a drastic improvement and a very good value. A little more upfront to set up, but then the monthly is awesome for what you get. So highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a great way to stay connected when you're out in the middle of nowhere, especially if you're dependent on cell towers. And I know a lot of you guys are dependent on the cellular Wi-Fi systems, or whatever you would call that. I don't know. I'm not using the right terminology, but it is a lot more reliable than that, even in beta mode. So
it is. Let me say hi to Charles Jolly, who's just down the road here out of town, a little ways from where I'm at right now, in outside of Minneapolis. So hey, Charles, thanks for checking in there.
all
And
right.
Carolyn, what about you? What are you? We kind of covered what I'm up to here, and on this kind of top secret mission. But what about you? What's going on with you?
I'm just holding down the homestead right now. You know, you kind of have these moments where it's like, hey, it's all just running smoothly and everything's going well. And then you have these moments where, at least in the family life side of things, things get a little rocky and everybody's sick and grumpy and tired. And so I feel like I'm mothering a lot more than I usually have to, at least more intensively dealing with the problem solving side of mothering. You know, mothering is obviously a full-time job anyways, but at the moment, I think we're all getting a little winter blahs is actually what I think is going on. Everybody's a little cranky. Everybody doesn't feel great. Everybody's really would love to see some sunshine right about now. And so I'm having to start like stepping up my proactive game on mothering and come up with creative, fun, engaging activities and kind of team building things to keep them all from bickering with each other and instead, you know, be positively engaged with each other. So I feel like that is actually taking quite a bit of my time right now. And just always this time of year, I really find that I am focused on upgrading our in-house systems, the inside systems. Uh, you know, we've already said it, we're in far north Idaho. We have, I don't know, 2.5 feet of snow still standing on the ground. Maybe 3 feet in some places. So there's not a lot of outdoor work happening here on the homestead besides just maintenance and keeping things healthy and at least on my side. I know the guys are out there plowing and shoveling and making sure we can still walk places on the property and taking care of animals. So I'm constantly trying to upgrade my household systems and get areas more organized, better organized, you know, working more smoothly. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I'm moving through all of the winter squash and the onions and translating them to their next life, I guess, is what I would say. They've just been in common storage and they're starting to get soft. They're starting to not do real well. And so before I lose them, I am actually doing a lot of freeze drying. And I got to tell you, I am loving these freeze dried onions, nicely chopped and then freeze dried is just like, it makes it so easy to make a meal out of them. So anyways, I'm doing a lot of that type of things just around the house, trying to keep everything together and keep it all maintained and organized and everybody happy and healthy and smiling, hopefully.
You're doing a great job. You do so good at just keeping a smile on when it's tough and helping encourage all of us, and those kids especially, because it's not just in the moment, it's character building for sure. And you sure do a great job with that.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, we're not going to do a question of the day because we're just going to do questions today. So I think we're going to jump right in. Does that sound good?
That sure does. Yep.
Okay, here's one. Ashley's here live with us right now, and she's got pocket gophers and low sunlight area to garden in. This is the only area she has for planting. We definitely have had some experience with gophers between Southern California and Idaho. They're both gopher rich locations.
Yeah, and really, you know, aside from poisons, which we don't do and don't recommend you do, we just don't want those in our soils. Cats is the best, most effective way to get rid of the gophers. However, you can trap them, and in the high mountains of Southern California, where we used to live, we had a lot of gophers, and we had a guy in our community that actually trapped. Do you remember his name, Carolyn? That went around and trapped gophers. And
I think we just called him the gopher guy. I actually can't remember his name.
Anyways, the good old gopher traps done correctly. So probably YouTube that, check that out. There's a method to it. A couple of our boys learned it from him for a while and helped out to accelerate clearing out the gophers in a new plot. And so you definitely can use those, and those have been the best. I mean, we've tried those little vibrating sound things, and they're okay. That you can get, if you've got some wind, you can get the one of those kind of kite owl predator bird things. Those seem to help as well.
Don't use those if you have chickens. I'm just saying, we terrified our chickens and took it down within a few hours.
Yeah, it is. If the chickens are right there, it's definitely gonna cause some problems. But those things do work. But ultimately, trapping and then cats, just they're gonna lower that population. Some good cats that are hunters. It's really the way to go there. And fairly low sunlight. I think you're just going to have to research the plants you're putting in. A lot of your leafy greens can do well without full sunlight. A lot of your core garden vegetables need at least 6 hours, a day of direct light to do well. Doesn't mean you can't grow them. You might get some lower productivity depending on what you mean by fairly low sunlight. So I think you need to figure out how many hours of sunlight you have in those spots, and then try to match some things up, do a little bit of research.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key, is find the things that are going to grow well in that low light setting, and don't try to amend the setting if it's not naturally going to do it. You're going to end up with not happy plants and not healthy plants, and then you'll be disappointed at the results. So just find something that grows really well in those low light situations. And like Josh was saying, the leafy greens are really a good way to go.
Hey, Lynn Ware says, for the gophers, moles, and voles, bazooka bubblegum. I've never heard of this. It swells. Where'd it go? Swells in their stomach.
All right.
Very interesting. I like that. That's very creative. She also says Alka-Seltz are tablets. I don't know if they eat them.
I've heard of those, but I've never known if they actually work, or if that's it. Was it Lynn? Lynn, if you've actually used those, would you just tell us down in the comments, like, you've seen that successfully work? Because sometimes you see these things on the internet and you're like, oh, that's funny, but you doubt that they're for real, and you wonder who's actually tried them. So I would love to hear if you've used that successfully.
Somebody here talking about using the blue healer is the best at ridding gophers, which I'm sure they can be, but I would think you'd get a lot of holes in the garden, which we don't want. So just be careful if you put the dogs on them. And somebody else asked, just to bring this up real quick, about chicken wire in the ground, like on a raised bed. And yes, that can work. That wire is gonna rust out eventually. But that is a great way. We've definitely done that in beds. In fact, in Carolyn's parents' house years and years ago, we did some raised beds and lined the bottoms of them with chicken wire. Just get the finest that you can get. Sometimes gophers will get through the 1 inch, so if you can get smaller, get it.
And do know that they will come above ground for certain crops. They have things they really, really like. So they will pop up and go around those things if they can, but it is going to get you a long ways forward. Okay, here is another question. Superhero Chris. Question for Josh and Carolyn. How much warmer will a greenhouse generally be inside for plants compared to the temperatures outside?
Wow. Well, that is going to fluctuate a lot. I'm assuming we're talking a greenhouse that is passive, meaning you don't have any active heating systems. Or cooling systems, depending on your environment. And so it's really gonna fluctuate. Ours in the summertime, non-vented, I've seen it 120 degrees and higher, which is not good. That gets way too hot. So you need to be able to vent it. And that's with like 80-degree temperature outside. So, we're seeing 30, 40, and even more degrees temperature difference that only lasts for a little while. So you have to have a way to regulate these things, and it's going to cool back down generally at nighttime, depending on how cold it is, to close to the same. So there's just a lot of fluctuation in a greenhouse, and they do need management, because you're trying to take that heat in during the day in those cooler climates, warm it up, but it's going to get too warm, so you've got to vent it. And then you want to be able to shut it down at night so you can still capture some of that heat and, you know, hopefully keep your soil warmer and get a little more through the night, and hopefully not as cold. But again, it's just going to depend on how cold it gets.
Good. All right. Let's see. Here is a question that was asked on Instagram. Should we grow indeterminate or determinate potatoes in containers? Also, grow bags versus container pots. Now, I gotta tell you, I actually had never heard potatoes classified in it as determinate or indeterminate. So I actually had to look this one up. And there are indeed indeterminate and determinate potatoes, just like there are tomatoes. That's where we usually talk about these terms. And the difference between the two is the exact same as with a tomato. An indeterminate is going to keep growing and keep producing as long as the season allows, whereas a determinate kind of gives one quick flush and then it's done. So usually you would do determinate potatoes in the early spring to have early spring, like a first flush of potatoes. Those you don't need to hill up as much because they're not going to keep growing. So they're not don't have the tendency to push out of the soil the same way. So the indeterminate potatoes are kind of your main season potatoes where you're going to get a much higher yield. You're going to get a lot more out of it, but you do need to hill them up. So you have to look at your different varieties. But as far as which one you would grow in a container, you could grow either of them. It kind of depends on the size of your container. If you're going to grow a indeterminate variety, you have to make sure you've got a lot of room in there and a lot of room to keep adding soil or mulch or whatever it is you're hilling up on top of the potatoes while they're growing through the season. So that you can definitely do the determinate also, especially if you have a smaller pot where you don't have as much room. And then the question about grow bags versus container pots, you know, you can do them in either. People grow potatoes successfully in old tires, in bags, in burlap sacks. Like you can kind of grow potatoes in just about whatever you want. But I would really recommend that you pay attention to your climate and your humidity in your area. Grow bags have a tendency to dry out very, very quickly. So if you live in a dry area, I would go with a solid sided container pot, and that hopefully will help you hold in some moisture there. If you live in a really humid area, then probably the grow bags are a great way to go.
Yeah, good. Hey, Carolyn, can you put up the post from Just Living Life? This is a good, more of a strategy question, but it's a really good one to address.
I will see if I can find that right now.
If you want.
I have the controls today, guys. So, so Josh has to ask me to do the
control.
I have control. I am scrolling and scrolling. Yeah. Can you tell me where it is?
We can't knock knees underneath and get each other's attention or signal or anything.
Okay. Wow, you guys. Yeah, just read it because I'm not finding it yet.
All right. Just Living Life. Is it just me and my husband? How much onions and garlics would you plant to be able to preserve to have last till next year if possible? There's so much conflicting information out there. And this is a great question because you're right. There is a lot of conflicting information out there. And the reason is because nobody can really give you a perfect answer for that. That is a very individual, you know, it's very subject to your use, to your family size, to how you're going to use it throughout the year. A lot of things like that. So this is something, and Carolyn will weigh in here in a second, but it's one of the things that's important for us to help share with you guys is that a lot of people give these very specific answers, and sometimes it just fluctuates per your situation and per person. And that's why you're seeing the conflicting information. There's rules of thumb, there's guidelines to get you going, but then you've got to work within your situation, your climate, your soil, as far as how much you grow and how much you can grow and all these things to determine what's best for you.
Let's see. I'm feeling like we might have just lost the feed. Hey, if you guys can still hear us, would you go ahead and like give me a thumb up thumbs up or something, because I'm seeing that there's one person watching right now, and a few seconds ago, oh, there we are. We're back to 427 people on here live. Okay, yes. Great. So yeah, this is that place where it's so important that the kitchen communicates with the garden, right? And this is essential, because you're eating in a different way than our family might eat. We eat a lot of onions every single week. And so we have to grow a lot of onions. So what I would really say is start paying attention to how many onions you would like to eat every single week. And then, multiply that out by how many weeks or months of the year you're eating out of your food storage, and then multiply that by like 1.5. Like, give yourself some buffer, because you might have some go bad. You have some that don't grow well, some that, blossom early in the first year. And speaking of onions, you guys, I'm actually really excited to tell you guys that I just filmed next week's pantry chat with Melissa K. Norris, and it was a garden pantry chat. And it ended up morphing into how to grow the best onions ever pantry chat. So if you're interested in onions, keep an eye out for next week's pantry chat. That should be a lot of fun. But yeah, so make sure you're giving yourself that buffer, but look at your diet and what you're actually eating. And that's where you should get the numbers. Same thing for the garlic. How much would you eat if you had as much as you wanted on hand? And then make sure that you are choosing really good storage varieties for everything to grow, so that you can actually use those through the whole season.
And if you're just getting started gardening and trying to figure, you're just like brand new, maybe it's your first season, second season, use your shopping list, use your groceries that you've been buying to go back and look at how much you've bought if you can, and even if you have to do it from memory. And that can be a guideline to get you started as far as how much you need to produce, and then work backwards from there to the planting schedule. But that's another thing that'll help you figure that out.
SJ Smith, I absolutely love this comment. Go ahead and plant 3 times as many onions as you would use. That way you can give some to less prosperous, to be that way you can, well, spelling check just does this to us all. But but yeah, do some extra, because you can give some away. Also, we like to plant doubly thick, and then in the spring, when we're thinning our onion plants, we use those as our green onions. So you were mentioning green onions. Maybe that's what you were saying. That's a great idea. So, double them, 1.5, something like that.
I was wondering if the green onions wasn't intended to be generous, because it was something about giving.
Maybe that was it. Yeah, I know. When we
I think that was spell check getting in the way there.
It happens to all of us. Okay, hey, let me get another question here.
Hey, Callie, we know that she's frozen. We're having a little bit of a challenge with our feed today there at Riverbend. And so thankfully the sound is coming through, but we have not been able to solve that. So we're just rolling with it.
Hopefully. Is the sound coming through for you guys? Because if you can only hear Josh, that would be an odd conversation. It is. Okay, here we go. This is a great one. This is from a Facebook post by Aaron Wharton. What is the most efficient and cost-effective way to make an indoor seed starting shelf? What's the best cheap but good lighting? Do all seeds need heat? These are great questions.
The most cost-effective way to make an indoor seed starting shelf is just to use what you have. Look around. I mean, kitchen counter, old table, some plywood. Really whatever you have or you can source cheaply, and just put something together. And of course, depending on the location in the house, but just get scrappy. That's the place to start for cost effectiveness. Look around and see what you have. It's also going to depend on how many seeds are you starting, how big of a table do you need, right? Are you starting a couple trays, or are you like us? And I don't know, we're often 24, 36 trays. Takes a lot more space. So just get creative and look around and see what you can find. I would say really, price compare if you have to buy some cheap, shelving you assemble yourself compared to maybe a piece of plywood and a couple of 2x4s or something like that, and just price compare for your area. Lumber's gone up a lot, so sometimes that's going to be cheaper. Maybe sometimes something else is. Good lighting. We've used just the fluorescent lighting replacement bulbs in the past, and they will get you by for starting. They're not great for growing to larger plants, but Carolyn, were those called something specifically?
They literally, I went to thrift stores until I found old shop lights that people had gotten rid of with the fluorescent tubes. And then I just got the cheapest, I think they're fives, the T5s. They are not the all spectrum. The all spectrum do have good benefits to them, but they're expensive. So, you know, we totally understand the idea of gardening and keeping things as inexpensive as possible. And so that has worked for us. We have since upgraded to an LED light system with all spectrum bulbs just because we use them a lot. We start a lot of plants, so that actually helps us in a few ways. But you can definitely do the cheap lighting. Just start going to the thrift stores and asking around, does anybody have old shop light fixtures that they're not using? And then get whatever cheap fluorescent bulbs you can get. On the heating, do all something there?
Nope, go ahead.
On the heating, no, not all seeds need heat. They do need to be warm, but that does not mean that you need to have a germination mat. In fact, I have the germination mats and I still don't use them most of the time. If you're starting your seeds in your house, usually you can get away with it just fine. But be creative about where you put your seeds. Some people put them on top of the refrigerator where it's naturally kind of warm up there, or look around where your heat vents are and put them right next to those. Like, you can get creative about how to heat your seeds in your soil if you need to for germination. You do get better germination if your soil is warm, but that doesn't mean that it's necessary. The other trick to that is you really only want to heat your soil while the plants are actively germinating. Once they're up, you don't need that same amount of heat. In fact, you want to drop that temperature down a little bit for most plants. So you can stagger out your seed starting and use one germination mat and say, you know, for 1 week, you've got the first set of plants on there, and then move them off once they're germinated and start the next set. And by doing that, you can get away with maybe just getting one germination mat.
Yep.
Okay, how about this one right here, Josh?
Let's see, we have too much hot sun and too much rain during the growing season. I've seen my tomatoes boiling on the inside. Goodness gracious, that is hot. Thinking about converting the planter to a greenhouse with vents. What do you think? Yeah, that can be very helpful. Tomatoes do not like a lot of water on them, and they certainly have a tendency to get fungus issues. So if you can keep them dried and you're in that environment, great. Just remember to keep them well ventilated as well. They need that air movement through them. And another thing you can do, you can space them out a little bit more, and you can trim the bottom leaves up, make sure they're not touching the ground, and even up a little bit higher as the plant matures, and that helps the air move under them and solve some of those issues.
You know, a really interesting permaculture solution for this that I have seen is to actually build a pergola over your growing beds and grow plants up on it. That way you're adding a little bit of humidity to the situation. I mean, maybe you don't need the humidity, but you're adding the shade and you know, helping the plants with some shading in there. And then that humidity does cool things down as the breeze moves through. So that can be an interesting option.
Hey, the bean tunnel, you could figure out a way to use that as well. Usually we trellis tomatoes on it, but you could, same idea as the pergola. That could be a good tool for that.
Okay, here we go. Eve, this is a great question. I struggle with having enough tomatoes ready for harvest at once for preserving. I freeze them, but would prefer canning fresh. I grow both determinate and indeterminate varieties, 6 plants each. You know, I really like this question because we talked about this in one of our last garden planning pantry chats, Josh, where you've got to be thinking about the harvest side of things when you're doing the garden planning,
Mhm.
because that it really affects things, especially if you're doing a lot of preserving. Um, and I can't tell you that I have some great answer for you, Eve, on this side, besides to keep working with different varieties and move more and more towards that determinate variety if you're trying to get them all at the same time, and find
Mhm.
a variety that does, does what you're looking for it to do. There are a lot of great determinate varieties out there, and especially of a sauce type. So just keep trying them, because if you're not getting them all to ripen at about the same time, that kind of tells me that maybe you've got a variety or two that's not very stable. Um, so keep trying on that side, but do keep trying and keep paying attention to what you're doing and keeping records on that, because you want to dial in that harvest side timing of the garden.
Yep.
Okay, I was talking and I was supposed to be finding the next question, so sorry. Let's see. Here you go. This is just a comment you can read while I'm finding the
Been
next
gardening
one.
for 2 years, and we're finally moving from our urban homestead to our first homestead. Congratulations, in the country. So excited to learn some new things for a new area. Sunshine and serenity. That is awesome. Love seeing you guys take that step, and good job on doing what you can where you're at. And that's really what we want to encourage all of you guys to do. A lot of people wait, they think and they plan a little bit, but they wait to take action until they're going to get to that next spot, that ideal spot. And you know what? There's a lot of opportunity, whether you're urban, inner city, suburban. Do everything you can where you're at before you move up, and you'll be that much more ahead of the game. So great job.
You know, we were watching a video in our household from Missionary Aviation Fund, and it was focusing on villages in Papua. And I was just, I don't know, it was really eye-opening to see how a lot of the rest of the world lives, in that even in their populated village town areas, they had those yards filled up with food, with chickens, with all sorts of things, even though they were small areas that they were living in populated areas. And it's just a good reminder, you can grow a lot of food in a very, very small space. So don't hesitate to just jump in, exactly like Josh is saying, and just do what you can wherever you are.
Hey, I wanted to answer a question real quick from Lynn Ware about the pantry chat. And is it scheduled same time, same day? Yes, generally. Well, it's always on Wednesdays. When we do live, it's what, 8:45, 9 a.m. It starts Pacific time. Generally, we've pre-recorded it, and so it's available by email, I think, first thing in the morning, isn't it, Carolyn? 5 a.m. or something?
It might even be before that. It's pretty early in the morning that it publishes on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. But Wednesdays, you can count on it on Wednesdays if you want to put that on your calendar to find it Wednesday morning.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine asks, I live in North Carolina on a mound of Carolina clay. What are your suggestions for growing vegetables? All raised beds, heavy soil amendment, etc.
Yeah, well, build up is the key. So raised beds is one way to do that, but you want to build up. One of the challenges with clay, if you turn everything in and till all your amendments in, is that clay just breaks everything down very fast, and it's very hard to build the organic content up in the clay. And so going up is a great way, whether you go to raised beds and just like that's kind of rocket fuel, build a raised bed 1 foot, 2 foot. I've seen people do it 3 foot high and bring in soil. And that's great. You're just getting above that. If, you know, that's a lot of resource. That's very resource intensive though, and can be hard to do. So the other thing is to just start building in raised beds, similar to the gardens that we use. And year over year, just build up. Don't turn everything in. Just keep building your soil up. You can do some pH tests, some soil tests, maybe add some lime, a few things like that that you can maybe use to loosen that soil up. But in the end, I would just really encourage you through composting and mulching to build the layers up above the clay soil as quickly as you can.
Okay, here's another one. How much watering do different plants need? It's very dry here and never know how much water and how often. Do different plants need different amounts of water?
Wow, good question. And the very straightforward answer is yes. If you're going to get technical, every plant's going to have a general different need. And the problem is that's very difficult for the home gardener that's trying to grow a variety of vegetables within one space to meet all the needs perfectly. So there's a rule of thumb, a general rule of thumb, which is 1 inch of water per week during the growing season. So that's a good place to start. But you're going to have to measure that, check that, and then gauge over time. Because if you're in a sandy area, a lot of that water is going to move through your soil more quickly. If you're in a windy area, you're going to have more evaporation and more of that water either blowing off if you're overhead watering or evaporating. And if you're in both, which we started gardening in an area that was sandy and windy, and we were still learning back then, so I can't tell you how much water it took, but it took a lot. So start with the 1 inch rule, and then adjust. Put yourself out a bucket, something with fairly large surface area, a pan. That's good enough to gauge and gauge your system, whatever water system you're using, to how much. Adjust that. And then when you check your soil, don't just dig down an inch, dig down a few inches and make sure that that water is soaking through.
Another thought on that one, mulch is going to be your best friend. You're
Yes.
going to want to get mulch onto your garden, and that is going to help regulate the water and have it available to your plants so they can take what they need, because they'll actually self-regulate to some extent as long as you're not drowning them or drying them out. So make sure that you are getting mulch on that soil to lock that water in.
And the other tip is to water more, less often. So don't spread an inch out of 4 days a week, maybe spread it out 2 days a week, or if you need more, and let it soak into the soil. That keeps the plants better watered, but it also goes deeper. It encourages the plant roots to go down deeper, which is going to cause them to be stronger and more resilient in the long run.
Okay, here's another one. We'll just do a couple more, and then Josh, I know you've got to get back to what you're doing in Minneapolis before long here.
Yeah.
Okay, Rebecca asked, what is the best soil to start seeds indoors?
Cool, good question. What we like to do is take 50% of our garden soil and 50% new compost and mix that in to make a seed starting mix. There's several benefits to that. It's not as light as a seed starting mix that you can buy, and which is, going to allow the roots to spread out a little faster. There's a little less resistance, but it's going to mimic your soil biology profile. So those plants are growing up in a similar environment that you're going to transplant them into. It's still light enough. It still has enough nutrient in it, and it's generally a lower cost solution than a seed starting mix.
There you go. All right. And Josh, how do you organize your seed starting schedule?
Wow. I and Carol and I are both not real great at all the organized planners. I don't have my garden one here, but just use a 3-ring binder and keep records, and often have a sketch of the garden, and then I build that out with the varieties and a timetable of where they're going and when they need to get started, as I develop that in the spring. There's also some great planners out there if that's something that's more helpful to you. I know some people really lean to those. I think Melissa has a real good planner for that. Carolyn?
I actually don't know that.
Okay. All right. So maybe I don't know that either. I feel like I remember that, but several people out there have them if you want the pre-made one. But a spiral binder is great.
Yeah. So Josh and I actually both start seeds for our different areas of responsibility, I guess. I usually do the kitchen garden, and I've kind of taken over the terrace garden. He does the main crop garden. And the thing that I found that works really well for me, because I get distracted really easily, is sometime in the spring, I will sit down and I will go through the seeds and figure out my start dates on them. and I will clump them by 1 week starting intervals and like rubber band them together with a sticky note that says win, because I need that. And I'll start writing right on the seed packets, like start every 2 weeks or whatever it is that I need to do. Um, and then move them to the next packet if there's something I'm going to succession plant. But it's easier for me to sit down and like figure it out once and get it all laid out, and then just be able to kind of watch the dates on the sticky notes. That helps me. That's a pretty low tech way. I mean, some people have all their fancy apps for doing all these things, and that's like as analog as you get, I guess. So
I wanted to reiterate, somebody mentioned this here too, the Clyde's Garden Planner is helping you just find dates. That is derived in a certain area of the country over in Missouri, but it is a great template as well. If you're just looking for seasonality, where to start indoors, where to start, that's a fantastic template that'll get you going. And we'll try to get a link for those into the feed down there.
Good. And then I just want to wrap up with this one, best advice for starting onions from seed. We are diving into that in depth next week in the pantry chat. It's me and Melissa K. Norris, and we really talk about starting onions from seed. So that is a lot of fun. Keep your eye out for that. But we've been on here for over 40 minutes today. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for dealing with the sound and the visual issues that were going on. And it was always fun to hang out. I love getting to be here live with you guys and actually do a little chatting back and forth. I think that's a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for next week's pantry chat, and we'll see you soon.
Goodbye, you guys.
Goodbye.